mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch it so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about episode 5 of FX and Hulu's The Patient, entitled Pastitsio. Let me first apologize for how I'm going to sound. I was getting over a sickness over the weekend, a little bit of a cold. I'm still kind of working my way through it, but I still have like a hoarse, dry cough, so it's making my throat a little scratchy. So I'm going to sound a little bit off, and if I'm clearing my throat or sniffling, that's a little bit, that's why. But I want to get that out of the way, and I also want to get out of the way shouting out my patrons. You know, anytime I get a couple more, I always want to shout them out on some of the more watched videos, but I'm not going to shout them out on every video, but they're always going to be in the episode description. And if you want any information on the Patreon, you can click the link in the episode description, or you can watch the major announcement video that's on the channel. But shout out to the patrons: Delvin Cox, Brett Factual, Dez, Justin Smith-Williams, Brian Turner, and Dancing Lights. Now, last week I kind of complained about the pace that this show is moving at. You know, I was saying, like, for episodes that are 25 minutes long or so, we are getting like drip feeds of progress. And I'm like, you know, I don't know how much longer I'm going to tolerate the pace of this show. And it's like they heard me, because sure enough, we picked it up big time in this episode. I thought this was a great episode. I thought it was really suspenseful, really exciting. There's a lot of interesting things they did in this episode, and a lot of things that I found to be pretty noteworthy that I want to talk about. So, I didn't say that. Did I talk about the episode title? Pastitsio. It's a name of the dish that Elias made for his mom, and that he is brought out to discuss prior to what ends up happening at the end of the episode. Oh, also, you know, I called him Elias last week, and I mentioned that, you know, I saw his name in the subtitle every time he wasn't on screen, so I knew his name before they revealed it at the end. But I do want to point out, they pronounce his name Elias in the show, not Elias, but it's spelled E-L-I-A-S. So when I saw that, I thought Elias, and I wasn't listening to how they pronounced it when they revealed the name at the end of last week's episode. But they say his name a bunch of times in this one, and they're pronouncing it Elias, so I'm going to pronounce it Elias. All right, so let's talk about what we learned and kind of like what I thought about those things. So the first thing is, we started this episode with Sam taking Alan's advice and going to visit his ex. We find out that they have an adopted daughter together, I believe together, or maybe shortly after their divorce. I couldn't really glean when the daughter was adopted. And then we learned that the ex also has a second adopted daughter that Sam didn't even know about. He asked her if she's talked to the daughter about him, and she says no, that's against the rules. You don't talk about ugly family stuff like divorce. And I couldn't really tell if that was him asking if, do you talk about me now that I'm gone, which leads me to believe that they adopted the daughter together, or if he's like, have you told her about me, in the sense of like, I'm telling you about someone from my past, my ex-husband. But then later in the episode, he talks about this experience with Alan, and he talks about them adopting this daughter together in Bangladesh. So I just thought it was unclear in that first scene where the adopting of the daughter came into play, but we find out about it later in the episode. But what I found interesting about this scene is that we know, and we've been told constantly in every episode, that Sam's issues revolve around his father and his abuse. I wonder if what prompted Sam to come home from the conversation with his ex and almost immediately go after Elias is the fact that he's frustrated that, I mean, this guy obviously has a hang up about fathers, right? Do you think he's frustrated that he could have, you know, he has a daughter that he could be in her life and be, you know, halfway decent, but he knows that he's not halfway decent and he's not in her life, and he's essentially a deadbeat dad because of what he does on the side. Like, he's got a side hustle, like making TikTok videos, like what he does on the side, just killing motherfuckers. But like, I wonder if his hang up over his father sparked his attack on Elias when he got home, because he was questioning his own perception as a father, how he's perceived as a father by this adopted daughter, by his ex, and just if he's thinking like, you know, my father was a piece of shit, and I don't know if my adopted daughter thinks that I'm a piece of shit. So I'm Curious if that might have been what prompted it. It's, it's left open to wonder about, but you guys can let me know what you think in the comments. I figure that's probably had something to do with it. Let's see. So when he goes after Elias the first time, after he gets home, Alan starts screaming for the mother to come down. The mother comes down, and very interestingly, she talks to him like a child. Go to your room, she says something like, "You're always better if you have a nap," or some shit like that. Talks to him like a child. He responds like a child, and then he listens, and he leaves. And one, we need to discuss or think about why talking to him like a child had an impact. Was that her kind of almost taking on the role of his father? And then also, why didn't she come down the second time? The second time at the end of the episode, when the end of episode events take place, Alan screams for the mother again, and she doesn't show up. And then we see a shot of her in the bed, like with the covers up to her neck, looking all kind of like scared and crying and nervous and stuff like that. So, but that lets us know that she heard this but did nothing. So questions out of that portion of it are, why did talking to him the way that she did, why did that work in that moment? And since it did work, why did she not go the second time? Did she expect it to not work? I don't know. And then also, just kind of like almost like 1B of the why did that work? 1B, will Alan take note of that and find a way to utilize that himself? Although it's kind of too late, but but anyway, I'm still wondering what's going to come from that. That's a very clear thing. And I think I want to take a brief break here and kind of just pose this question before I forget it. There's been a lot of information we've learned about Sam, and we've learned more in this episode. And it makes me wonder, again, rhetorical question, I'm just putting it out there for everyone. Are these things that we are learning just to get a clearer, more three-dimensional portrayal of Sam and learning more about who he is, and just so we can understand who he is more? Or are these facts going to come into play later? I'm starting to wonder if I'm giving, I don't mean for this to sound like an insult. I'm starting to wonder if I'm giving this show more credit than it deserves. Like, because I'm thinking like, okay, his the way he's peeing all the time, his obsession with food. There was something, the Kenny Chesney stuff, being talked to like a kid and having that work, like porn. Like, what do all of these things mean? Like, like I said, are these things that are being used just to teach us who Sam is? Or are these things going to come into play later? And I'm wondering, I'm shifting from believing these things mattered and would come into play later to thinking like, maybe I was giving the show too much credit and those things are not necessarily things that are going to be coming into play later or be clues, but they're just things to help us learn more about Sam. So you can let me know what you think about that in the comments as well. We see a couple, this irritated me too. We see, I can't say two, there wasn't anything else that irritated me. We see some more flashbacks to Alan's past with his wife. And he talks about it with Elias, but we don't really get any new info here. And I'm wondering, what was the point of these scenes? Like, there's no forward progress in the relevance of the flashbacks. Like, I don't understand why we are getting these flashbacks every episode, but they are giving us either nothing or next to nothing as far as just information that helps us understand why the flashbacks are being shown in the first place. Like, in the beginning of the season, I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, these things are going to come into play and help us understand actions that Alan is going to take in the future, which may still be the case, but they're not providing enough info and they're not having any impact on any actions that Alan is taking with Sam. So I'm wondering, like, when are we going to either learn something substantial about Alan's past, or when is Alan's past going to come into play in the present? Right now, we haven't really learned much of anything other than the Orthodox thing, which we learned about episodes ago. We're just getting like more evidence of that there's a rift because of that. But we already knew that. So it's like, okay, are we going to learn anything of substance? Or is this going to come into play in the present? So we also learned that Sam is on like I don't know if it's like a specific like Kenny Chesney message board or if it's one for all of country music. I saw one that said country something and like a banner, but like the full page was on screen for a split second, and just be honest, I ain't feel like pausing it. I was like, I saw country something. So it's a Kenny Chesney message board, it's a country message board or a chat, whatever. I get it. So we learn he's on there. He talks to a couple of people on there, kind of gets updates on them and what they're going on. So we know he's kind of got like this online community he fucks with. And we also learn that he's into porn. And I'm just like, man, could this be a more tropey portrayal of a serial killer? It's like, oh, wow, daddy issues. His mom talks to him like a child. He looks at porn and he interacts well online and not in person. Like, like, wow, this is like the least imaginative serial killer portrayal I've ever seen. Like, I've seen enough of these documentaries to know that these are all kind of like the boxes that you tick off for like what makes a serial killer. So yeah, I don't know, man. There's some interesting stuff that happens, but then there's stuff like that where it's kind of like, yeah, no shit, he's into porn. like who is it? But I'm wondering if this show is going to kind of toe the line between doing some interesting things, doing some special things, but again, me giving it more credit than it's earned by thinking that a lot of these clues are going to come into play, or a lot of these flashbacks are going to come into play, or like a lot of the information that we're learning about Sam is going to come into play, or in this case, that the information is even interesting. Like, I don't give a fuck that he's into porn, or that he's got an online community. You know, like all of those things are like serial killer 101. Like, give me something unique, give me something interesting. So still kind of on the fence right there with that information. So at one point in the episode, Elias asked Alan to kind of like help him jump Sam. He's like, make up a therapy reason for you to invite me into the therapy session. Once I'm out there, basically we double team him. We both attack him. So later in the episode, Sam gets up in the middle of the night and Alan invites him to have this session. And he starts to put this into play. And he says we should invite him out there, him being Elias. He mentions like, you say your father is the root cause of your issues, but I'm wondering if, while that is true, if like your father, he beats you for no reason, are you seeking out these people for no reason? Like not for no reason, but like, are you an angry person who was made violent because of the acts of your father, and now you are seeking out a reason to let that go, like to show or execute on that violence? Like, these people didn't really do anything. You're just kind of like fashioning up excuses to why they deserve it. And I thought that was like, man, that's a valid fucking point. And then when he asked Sam to bring Elias out, now I'm in an interesting place, because I'm wondering now, is he going through with the plan? Like, is he gonna plan to jump Sam, or is this actually a real thing? Like, did it start off as like, come up with some bullshit therapy excuse to bring me out, but then it became an actual real excuse to bring him out? Because it felt valid. So like, I'm wondering, like, is this a ruse, or is this an actual real attempt at helping Sam? And I like the fact that the episode gave me just enough info to not be sure what was going to happen in that scene, or not even to be sure what was going to happen, but what Alan's goal was in that scene. I like the fact that I wasn't sure, and I like the fact that the show gave me enough to make me wonder. I was actually very nervous about how that was going to play out. And it played out in a very unexpected way, because before Elias can even talk about his Pastitsio dish, Sam chokes the life out of him, and Steve Carell crushes this scene. Like, the screaming, the yelling, the fright, the terror, like just the idea of watching, especially given the fact that he's had so many conversations with Sam. Elias has been there for a little while now. To see someone get the life choked out of him right in front of you, and there's nothing you can do, and you've been actively working for all this time to prevent this from happening, and it happens anyway, despite all of your best efforts. And him screaming like that, man, Steve crushed that scene, bro. Loved it. And then lastly, we see that Sam apparently keeps the wallets of his victims, I'm assuming. And that makes me wonder, too, are we to take away from that all of his victims are men? And if so, again, is he targeting these men because, from his perspective, and I don't think this is a conscious thing, I think it's subconscious, does he need to kill his father? Like, are these people who he sees something of his father in him? Because he's saying, like, these people are all assholes. They got it coming. He feels that same way about his dad. His dad was the fucking asshole. He would have it coming. So are these people doing things that remind him of his dad, and then he's killing his dad, to kind of like release all this pent up frustration toward his father, and then saving the wall? It's like, again, a serial killer trope. They keep mementos from their victims. I'm wondering, like, how he meant to glean that all his victims are male, because that's gonna lead me toward assuming that there's some sort of connection between his victims and his father that's a little bit more direct. And I feel like, throughout the history of serial killers, if you watch documentaries or whatever, it's either like there's no specificity regarding gender, or it's women, like, exclusively. Like, I don't think you hear too many where it's like exclusively men. So, like, I'm wondering if that's what we are supposed to take from it, that his victims are all men. And if so, is this essentially him killing his father, finding reasons to kill these people because they remind him of his father, and that's how he gets back at his father for everything that his father did? So let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to wrap up with a couple of thoughts real quick. One, I was just as surprised as his mom when Sam didn't know those foods that his daughter likes. Like, how you don't know these for all this shit you be bringing in your house? You don't know these foods that this kid eats? Like, I feel like he would know every food that exists. I chuckled when Alan mentioned, while he's dictating to Elias what he wants Elias to tell his family if he gets out, and he goes, "Yeah, that's kind of long though, so just say whatever you can remember." Because I was thinking that, I'm like, it's a long ass message, bro. Like, you ain't gonna remember all this. In the flashback to where Beth is singing at this church and Ezra's still a kid and he's totally into whatever's going on, which, again, I'm frustrated that, like, what do we need that scene for? Like we already know we know how that plays out. Like, no matter how into what she's doing he was as a kid, we already know he's gonna grow up to be Orthodox and not fuck with her no more. So what was the point of that? Like, that didn't make me feel any different. Anyway, in that flashback, Steve Carell is clean shaven and he looked like Michael Scott. And I was just wondering, I'm like, was there like some de-aging going on here? Like, I don't know. He looked really young to me. Oh, I liked when he told Elias that kosher food is regular food with 1,000 rules. I thought that was funny. And then probably my favorite moment of the episode, as far as humor goes, which I don't even know if it was meant to be funny, but it was funny to me, when Sam is in his room after his mother sent him there like a child, and he's on his Kenny Chesney message board. Then he starts looking at porn. And then it cuts to Alan, like, lotioning up his feet. And I'm just like, well, there's some porn for you, Sam. Alan's lubing up his feet in the other room. You can get, like, real life jerk off material. If you got a foot fetish, you good to go. So, I just remember putting in my notes, like, there's some porn for you, Sam. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. I thought it was a strong one, and I'll see you guys next week for episode 6. Peace.